Okay, good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chris.
I'm glad y'all came out here for Dick's talk. He's coming straight to us from Newington, Connecticut via Los Angeles. If you would, please silence your radios and silence your phones. Dick is on his 10th trip out here to QuartzFest. His first one was 2011. And we thank you so much for coming out here. Dick is our Southwest Division Director for the ARRL N6AA. Dick's our Southwest Division Director for the ARRL, and I hear there's lots of information to give us today.
Thanks, Chris. So a number of topics I'm going to cover today, just roughly sort of the status of the ARRL, happenings with the person we call CEO, what we're going to do to replace him, an important new group. It's not a new group, but it's a group that is going to be very important in the future of ham radio. Southwest Division, management, politics, happenings, homeowners association, legislation, the threat to the 3 gigahertz microwave band from 5G internet, our new magazine On the Air, the volunteer monitor program, the website, WinLink, 2.8 kilohertz bandwidth request, technician class license privileges enhancements, the lifelong learning site for ARRL, and the jammer on the West Coast. We may not get to all of these things. In addition, this is a two-way interchange. This is a forum. Anything you guys want to bring up, please do. You'll have an opportunity to present it, not only to me, but there's going to be about 150 of you here that will hear it, and it will get propagated away appropriately. Let's first talk about the ARRL itself. I assume almost all of you are members. The ARRL is the National Organization for Amateur Radio in the United States. It has about 157,000 members. It's essentially the same as it had a year ago. We're down 140 members for the year, but we were up from November, so it's turning around a little. So, but from the big picture, the number is roughly constant. One thing did change significantly is we now have $4 million more in the bank than we had a year ago. So if you're concerned about the league going out of business, you might not worry about it too much. In fact, compared to, say, 9 or 10 years ago, we have over $20 million more in the bank than we had then. A lot of this is due to the stock market going up, people making bequests as they pass on, but we're not hurting financially. We actually probably need ideas of how to spend the money. The league has, as I said, 157,000 members. There are about 100 of us that you elect to positions to run parts of the league. I'm the director of the Southwestern Division, which is Southern California and Arizona. Here is Tom Abernethy, W3TOM, who is the director of the Atlantic Division, which is basically Pennsylvania, Western New York, Southern New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and District of Columbia. We have the International Vice President, Rod Stafford, W6ROD, in a easy to see at night jacket. And Rod has been past president of the league as well as the director of the Pacific Division, which would be Northern California, Nevada, and Hawaii. We also have here 3 section managers. They're all elected. Arizona, Rick Paquette, W7RAP, who just gave a talk across the street, is here. On my right, Bill K8TE from New Mexico is somewhere out here. No, he's right next to me. No wonder I can't see him. And in the back somewhere is Carl Gardenius, WU6D, who's the orange section manager. Orange is basically across the river from here. Orange County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County, and Inyo County in California. So those people are elected to positions by the members essentially directly, although Rod is indirect and that the directors elect him, but he has been an elected, directly elected person. We also have some number of volunteers who are club coordinators and assistant section managers and things like that, maybe around 1,000 of them, and there is a number of them here I see. We won't go into that. Then there's the rest of 100,000 plus members. We also have a paid staff in Newington, Connecticut of slightly less than 100 people that do things like put the magazines out, keep the trains running, organize the section managers, organize the elections, have a headquarters where you can go visit, run an operation where you can ask technical questions or other questions about ham radio and get them answered. And that organization is run by what we've called recently a chief executive officer, a CEO. As I'm sure many of you have read on the internet and other remnants of the blogosphere, maybe we could say, the league did not renew the contract of the CEO who had the job last year, and there's all kinds of speculating about what happened. There are people who say, this is a personnel issue, we can't discuss it. I'll discuss it a little. You'll understand the league a little better, at least the board of directors a little better, if you look at the directors as being members of one or two political parties. Now, these aren't official political parties. They're groups of people who maybe a couple years ago I described as the Confidentiality Party and the Transparency Party. And in many cases, you can analyze what's going on by which group supports what. And 2 or 3 years ago, the Confidentiality Party had a clear majority on the board. I'd say it was 11-4. 2 years ago, we had elections, 4 seats changed, so the majority party went from Confidentiality to Transparency Party, and it was 8-7. This year, we had another election where 1 more seat changed, and so I'd say the Transparency Party is in the majority now with 9-6. We don't all vote the same way all the time. On different issues, some people may switch over. And the reason that I picked the name Confidentiality Party and Transparency Party had to do with one specific ruling that the Confidentiality Party, or what I called them, made. They passed something called the Code of Conduct for Directors and Officers of the ARRL, and one of the things that I didn't think was correct was they said, I was not able to tell you how I even voted on something unless that was a vote recorded in the minutes of the league. No less was I allowed to tell you why I voted this way or that way. And to me, I thought that was confidentiality on a part of an issue that was unwarranted, that if you're going to make a choice of whether I should be elected director next time, you ought to know how I vote, and that might have a giant impact on what you decide. So that was the delineating difference between confidentiality and transparency. Transparency doesn't mean, I don't have shades on my windows of my house or something like that, and some people have extended it, but it basically has to do with the ability of the directors to communicate to the membership what's going on. This time, the league did not renew the contract of the CEO, or the person running the 100-person organization of paid employees in Newington, Connecticut. In a way, what happened was very simple, and in another way, it's quite complicated. to put it in the simple terms is there was an election. A majority of the directors voted to not renew the contract. But now the complicated part is there's 15 individuals that voted, and I don't know what went through all their heads. I have some idea what went through my head and why I might have voted one way or another. If you listen to the blogs on the internet about people saying this happened or that happened, some of them may have some element of truth to them. Some of them are overt speculation. I mean, one of them was he was still involved with his robot company in Japan. Well, I don't know to what extent that was true, and that wasn't something that was on my mind when I made my decision. Others have made the speculation that, well, he wasn't, quote, a real ham, whatever that means, and I'm not sure that was on my mind to the extent that it would sway the vote one way or another. Also, the vote was not unanimous. It was, I think the numbers are going to be reported in the minutes, which have not come out yet, but some directors wanted to renew, others didn't. So that's the story. Regarding other speculation about there was something evil going on, let me say very simply, Howard was a decent person, an intelligent person, a well-meaning person who did good. Maybe what I can say is a majority of the directors thought that somebody else might do the job better. That's about the story. And there's speculation on the internet about, well, this is, CEOs. CEOs just bop from one job to another. There's no problem. Howard is able to retire. I don't know his personal financial situation, but my suspicion is nobody here needs to worry about him. Even without whatever he gets from his robot company in Japan, he's doing extremely well, and he can retire. He took the job at ARRL as sort of a retirement job to give back to a community of hams that he got a start in his career from. It's not that he needed a job or that he's going to bop off to some other CEO job. Does anyone have any particular comments or questions on the decision of the board? Okay, we'll move on to what's the next step.
Was he replaced?
He has not been replaced yet, and that's what we're going to talk about now, what's going on to do that. The board voted for a committee to find a new CEO, and the board brought back Barry Shelley, N1VXY, who had a long career at the league. He was the chief financial officer. Before that, he was called the business manager. Then when NY2RF departed, Barry took over for a year and a half. Barry, although he has a call sign, I wouldn't say is an active on-the-air ham. Barry did a fine job of keeping the trains running for a year and a half or so, and the board voted to bring him back. Barry had moved from Connecticut to South Carolina, so the board had to make some arrangement for him to come back and possibly visit his family now and then. And that's happening now. And what I want to talk about to you and actually ask from input for you is, what is the right way to do this job? One of them would be to make some comment on what happened last time we did a CEO search. And I believe this is essentially in the minutes of the board meeting so that you can verify it that way. We had a search committee. They came back with, here's the answer. Here's the jack in the box, push the button, out comes the guy. And if you're a board member and you ask a couple of questions, well, who are the other main contenders for the job that you didn't pick? What's the answer? We're not telling you. Number two question is, well, what were the attributes that made you select this guy over some of the others? The answer, we're not telling you. You gave us the job of finding a guy. Here's your guy. And so some of us weren't particularly pleased with that approach. And some of us knew other people that had applied and wondered why some of them might have not been given the job. The vote to select Howard as CEO was not unanimous. It was reasonably close. So what we'd like to do now, at least I would like to see happen, is that we have a CEO picked that is more uniformly liked by the board. Whatever his attributes are, they're agreed to as important. Make no doubt about it, Howard Mickle had very good attributes. It's just some of the things that some people thought were important, others thought other aspects of a candidate's background were more important than that. So that's where we're going now, and I guess I'll ask a question to the group. Is it important that the board go out and have what I'll call a formal CEO search process where we ask for people to submit resumes, we evaluate everybody, and we pick somebody, and in the meantime we have an interim CEO who kind of keeps the ball going? Or if the board knew somebody that they actually wanted, would it be appropriate for the board to just put him in the office? And you might view the second possibility as something similar to if you were running a baseball team and you needed a new second baseman or center fielder. Do you put an ad in the New York Times? No. You know who the people who can play that position well are, and you look around at them and you recruit one of them. And I kind of perceive the job as running the ARRL staff operation as essentially that. You need to know how the ARRL works. You need to know what ham radio is all about. This group has members of different aspects of ham radio that we'll never talk to on the air, but we all have some kind of overall interest in it. One of the things people say one of the requirements is you have to be a real ham. I'm not positive what that is, but others have said something, phrased it a little different, and their description of the attribute that they'd like is the person ought to have a passion for ham radio. It shouldn't be at 5 o'clock he goes home and does something else, period. He ought to be on the air. He ought to make a new grid dip meter or whatever he does. He ought to be interested in ham radio beyond that of just a job. So I'd just be interested, does anyone have any comment on that kind of issue? Best that we do this formal search with requests for applications, or is it okay if we just picked a guy that we thought was correct because you guys elected us to be the directors and run the league and it was up to our judgment? So, and then, some of you aren't going to have a decision, but let's ask the first thing. Is it important that we have this formal search process? Those that are in favor, and we have about 30. And how many think it's okay if the board picks somebody that they knew? And it's probably slightly more. It's probably more like 40. So it's not 100 to 0. It's a split vote. And excuse me? Okay, the comment was you're going to get the same guy either way. The difference might be that you got him 6 months earlier. So, any more comment on CEO searches? And one other comment I will add is the league changed its Washington area council, the lawyer who represents us to the FCC, and we didn't do a search on that. We just knew a guy who knows that world. He used to work for the FCC. He worked at the top of the FCC with the commissioners, not the present group of them, but he knows how the operation works, and he's in there doing a good job, and we didn't go for a search. We have two comments here. First, Virgil in the front.
Yeah, I voted for the first option because it doesn't need to be a long, drawn-out, formal process, but I think there should be at least be a call for applicants of
Okay. He didn't think it should be a long, drawn-out process, but he thought there should be a search for candidates, and the comment behind him.
How about our hands of no opinion?
I thought there's about 140 or 50 of you, and about 70 of you voted, so I'll just subtract out and say 80 of you don't care. Is that fair? And the process now, as I look at it, could take 6 months. If I were doing it, it would take 6 weeks, but there's a more formal group that's going to do a more thorough combing of the background, I guess, and it may take that. I'm hopeful that they'll get it done much shorter. We have a comment in the back. Okay, that is a sort of a summation of what other people have said. He said if you're a part of the Transparency Party, it would be more appropriate to have a thorough search instead of putting in somebody that consider your buddy. The person I want, I wouldn't consider my buddy. I kind of knew him a little bit, but it was because I evaluated his background and what he has done. I might think he's appropriate for that job. We had another comment in the back. Well, and his comment was that if you make a search based on people you might exclude qualified candidates, and the appropriate person might be a she instead of a he. And let me assure you that one of the candidates that was considered quite highly last time was a she. So I believe, and the past president of the ARRL has been a woman, so we appreciate women and they have a role to play, at least in my mind. Well, a comment here?
Is there a problem with giving the board the discretion to choose at the appropriate time which direction they want to go in? Whether they want a search committee or appointing someone?
Yes, I'll answer that by saying we made that decision and we voted to form a search committee. So the question was, can you do that? The answer is yes, we already did it. Okay, let's go on to something else. Let's go on to the ARRL ain't the only player in town anymore. There's a group of people, one of them who, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago, somehow got 16 million what are called Internet IP4 addresses. When you have a website, something like ARRL.org, the Internet somehow takes the ARRL.org that you put in, looks it up in a table, and goes to some set of numbers like 12.642.38. These people, back when no one thought the Internet was going to amount to anything, gathered up all the numbers that began with 44 decimal something else, and there were 16 million of them. Last spring, summer, they sold 4 million of them, so they only have 12 million left. There are 700,000 people that have licenses in the U.S. I'd say maybe half of them are really still interested in ham radio. So with the 12 million left, there's probably only 36 of these addresses available for each of the hams. I actually know 2 people who have these addresses, so there's still 11,999,000 whatever thousand left. So there's lots of these addresses left. We don't know exactly how much money these people got for these addresses, but based on the value of the internet addresses, it appears to be in the order of $100 million. Now, that's almost as much as many of you make in a year, and I mean, it's almost as much as I make in a year, as long as you are confused about decimal points. But the nature of the organization, and they're called Amateur Radio Digital Communications, and the addresses were coupled to a group called AmpereNet, AMPRNet, and that's how you applied for them. When they sold the addresses off, if anybody lost one of the addresses that they sold off, they gave you another one. There's, 12 million of them left. There was some criticism that, well, some guys in Germany are still using these numbers, and that's true, but the issue with the people in Germany using them, they're using them in a completely closed system. They're not connected to the real big worldwide internet. So on your own personal internet, you could use any numbers or letters or anything you want to go back and forth between your addressees. So it looks like there's no damage done to hams, and particularly with 11,900,000 of these addresses left that they could give out. They have a stated objective of helping ham radio. And I'm on the outside of this group. The then president of it was a fellow, Brian Cantor, WB6CYT, and a major player was Phil Karn, KA9Q, who is reasonably well known in the technical community of amateur radio. I met with them back in, October or September or something like that, and we had a reasonably good interchange. We kind of agree on things that ought to be done to improve ham radio. Our goals are sort of the same. Then what happened is Brian Cantor went and died a couple months ago. I treated him as an interesting character. You look at somebody with a long ponytail and earrings in his ears, and then when he talks, it's like this is a guy who runs a corporation. He talked business sense. He just sounded level-headed, clear-thinking. Not that length of hair is related to that negatively in any way, but I was impressed with him, but unfortunately he passed away. Now Phil Karn is president. Phil and I think roughly the same in terms of what ought to be done. And their major goal is education. And what are we going to do? A quick comment?
Yeah, I just was wondering, are you talking about IP addresses?
Yes, IP addresses is what they sold.
Thank you.
So back to Phil and I have discussed things on the phone as what can the ARRL do coupled with them? What can they do independently? They don't exactly know which way to go. And some of the suggestions I made are, or Phil and I have made, one of them is the ARRL Foundation gives out about 100 scholarships a year. And if any of you know anybody who's a ham graduating from high school or in his early years of college, he might consider applying for them. These scholarships range in value from $500 to $5,000. When I was going to college, a $500 scholarship meant a lot, as tuition was $1,100 a year. Now, most of you realize that the cost of a year at a big school can be $50,000, $60,000 a year, and $500 is less than a person can make at a minimum wage job working for a week. So it may not be as important. Well, the suggestion that Phil and I came up with is ARDC might donate money to boost the value of each one of the scholarships up to the $5,000 level. Now, what that does is the people in the ARRL figuring out who get the scholarships don't have to do any more work. They already have the applications. They can grade the applicants and go appropriately. What has to happen, though, is we have to get some kind of agreement from either the sponsors of the scholarships to go from the Joe Smith Memorial Scholarship to the Joe Smith-ARDC Scholarship or something like that. The alternate is we could just award the Joe Smith Scholarship by itself and say, hey, you also get a matching grant scholarship from ARDC. The exact details of that have to be worked out. Is it guaranteed that it's going to happen? No, but right now, that's the way we're thinking. I've made a bunch of other suggestions to ARDC. They are met initially favorably, and I'll go over some of my thinking with respect to them. There are an awful lot of people supporting, I'll call it tertiary education, colleges, and giant foundations. Ford Foundation, Olin Foundation give grants of $1 million, $100 million, a couple $100 million to build new buildings, to build new campuses and like that. Tertiary education also has the ability to absorb as much money as you can possibly throw at it. No matter how much you have, they'll take it. So I don't know that supporting more scholarships is an important thing that's going to change the world that much. There are a question that comes up is, should attention be given to high school students, to new hams, to middle-level hams, to experienced hams? Where should they put some focus? And the second question is, if you're not going to award scholarships or something, maybe you can look at education as either creating content or distributing it. And again, there's plenty of content that's available. I was here last year and talked about the ARRL idea of its website and videos that did something. And there was at least one fellow here. Is KE0OG here? No, he's not. He pointed out that he alone had over 400 videos on the internet describing technical issues, and I've looked at some of them. They're well done. I thought they were appropriate. So we don't need, in my thinking, we don't need a new group going out making more videos. What we might do is go look at what's out there, point out what the best video for putting coax connectors on coax is, what the best video for this is, or the top 2 or 3, and list them or somehow make access to them available. And then if there are weak points, areas that could be done better significantly, that's where attention gets put. The second area where I think attention should go is delivery. And I've suggested 3 particular ways to go. One of them is to fund one-day-long seminars that are associated with ham conventions. Those of you who go to Dayton know that there's something called Contest University, which is an all-day Thursday event. People pay extra money for it. They go to classes where people talk about contests. There's DX University also. At PacificCon, many of you have been there, it's the convention that's in Northern California every fall. They often have Friday a special session on antennas. You pay extra to go. People talk about aspects of antennas. Well, my suggestions were different than things that we've normally done that have to do with, I'll call, communications that maybe some people would like to know about. And one of them is, I have a contraption here that has about 5 or 10 transceivers in it. It talks on various bands, and it probably will last, even though I subjected it to a fall on the ground. But it talks to Wi-Fi, it talks to Bluetooth, it talks to various bands, and I would be interested to know better how it works. I'd be interested to know if the site I was talking to was down the road that way. Should I hold it this way, this way, this way, this way? Or what does the antenna patterns look like? Maybe some of you know, I don't, and I think that kind of thing would be interesting. I also think that computers are an interesting thing that could be exploited that have to do with communications. When you set your computer up in your motel and you connect to the Wi-Fi, how does that work? Who calls CQ first? Who answers? How do they divide the time up? I don't know whether any of you know that, but that's a question I have. Here's a question from the audience.
So yeah, I got lost somewhere at the beginning. You started talking about IP addresses and a couple of key people and ARDC and how evidently they've got, hundreds of millions of dollars because they sold off IP addresses. How does that relate to the ARRL
Okay.
at all?
Okay, we have a question. How does ARDC's money relate to the ARRL? And I guess I left out one step. They may have around $100 million, but they are now going to become what's called a 501c3 foundation, private foundation, as opposed to a charity. That means they get most of their money every year from investments. The Internal Revenue Service has a rule. If that's the kind of organization you are, you have to spend 5% of your money every year some way. Otherwise, the interest you earn or the gain you get can be classified as income and you'll have to pay taxes on it. So we have this organization that is going to have to spend millions of dollars a year on ham radio. They're independent of the ARRL. They can do everything they want by themselves. I'm pointing out that the ARRL is an asset that they might benefit from, and the ARRL might benefit from their financial support by working together. And the suggestions I'm giving are ways that we might work together to make ham radio better.
Okay, well that's a large leap, and you're making assumptions that they're willing to work with you.
That's exactly correct. It is a large leap. I'm making the assumption that it's possible to work with them, and I'm trying. Is it absolutely clear that I'm going to succeed? No, but the way things look today, they need help, I think. And maybe we can support some of the things they do, and we have this rough agreement already on the scholarships. Maybe we can extend it. That's where I'm going. We had a comment back here.
The ARRL be willing to support the radio organizations that are putting on things like the antenna seminar. I mean, they have to rent a lot of rooms.
Okay, you're one step ahead of me. And I'll answer the question by discussing what I'm going to discuss. Some other ways that the ARDC money might be used either directly or through the ARRL to benefit ham radio. So one of the things was these one-day seminars, and the question is, what do they pay for? Do they pay for somebody to generate the material? Do they pay for the meeting room so that people don't have to pay? Or maybe you pay $5 or $10 just so you don't sign up and not show up and use up a seat that somebody else could have got. I mean, if it isn't worth $5 to you, maybe you don't belong there. Or exactly what? And should they be paying to make these seminars move around the country? PacificCon this month, QuartzFest that month, Yuma, wherever, Hamcom, Boxborough, there's plenty of these. So there's a possibility of funding in many of those instances. The third, and one of the events that strikes me as most appropriate for support is one that's held in the desert of Arizona every January, where a lot of people come together, and a major goal of this is education. Every day there's talks on things, there's walk-arounds where you not only hear what people do, you can go look at it and touch it and see how people have solved problems that you might have. I consider that a unique and valuable contribution to ham radio, and I think I support supporting that financially in whatever way makes it happen better than it does today. So I wouldn't expect, let's say I would expect this group to be somewhat supportive of that. Arizona-California border and also almost in Mexico. They're going to pay for hotels for a couple of nights, and they're going to give a couple of technical talks. It's not clear that maybe their expenses might be in some way covered. So again, these are possibilities that I've brought up with Phil, the president of ARDC. When I brought them up, he was receptive to them. Are they locked in stone? No. Is it possible that something else will happen? Yes. But I'm working to hopefully do my best to make whatever ARDC's assets are improve amateur radio. Does anyone have any comments or questions about this? Right here.
One of the things to think about is recruitment and retention, putting some money into that.
The suggestion was improvement in retention, and that's an interesting thing we'll talk about for a second. When I got my license, I got a novice class license. If you didn't upgrade to general in a year, you were history. You didn't have a license anymore. And what I did about 2 years ago was I asked the question, back in those days, how many people went on to the next level? How many people were still interested in ham radio a year and a half after they got their license? And I was, KN2PHF was my first call. And so I went back and got a call book that was a year and a half after I was licensed, so that if you had a KN2PXY or whatever it is call, and you upgraded to general, you became K2PXY or whatever. And I counted the number who went on and the number that dropped out. And what the number was back then was about 50% of the people that got licensed dropped out after a year. Ham radio didn't do enough that they upgraded. Now they could have upgraded to technician where they didn't have to learn Morse code at 13 words a minute, but they didn't even do that. They just gave it up. What we have today is we have 35,000 people every year get licenses. And if we applied the same, half of them would really drop out after a year because they weren't necessarily interested. What you have is, we now think we have 700,000 people with licenses, but if we took off the 200,000 that would be appropriate if people were dropping out at the same rate we had before, we'd have quite a few less. So there's a group of people who say the ARRL isn't doing enough to get people interested in joining. It's hard to do that for people who don't have some kind of technical interest or operating interest or emergency communications interest. In Palos Verdes, California is the Palos Verdes Amateur Radio Club, a very active group. A retired Hughes Aircraft Vice President, Walt Ordway, K1DFO, gives regular classes in ham radio. And their last PVARC bulletin said, Walt's giving a class that might be the largest ever. And it's 40 employees of Los Angeles Airport who are going to get their ham licenses. How many of these guys do you think are going to join the ARRL? Not a high number. And I don't think that anything the league could do other than giving them a free membership, which they may or may not pay any attention to, would get them in. So it's hard to do that. I don't know the answer. The term retention is, there are people who are going to try this avocation and they're not going to be as interested as maybe you or I might be. I get on the air and I talk to people in Morse code in other countries, and I think that's cool. And there are actually several people in the United States who would rather do something else with their life. And I can't say that what I do is any better, and they need to do that. So I don't know the answer to retention. The league is doing what it can to maybe get people educated in the aspects of ham radio, get them involved with groups of other hams so that they get some feeling of camaraderie. Those are things we can do, but there are some that are going to drop out. Any more comments on?
A heck of a lot of people that I run into didn't even know that there about it in any media. They're never exposed to radio advertising.
The
It
co-
might be an idea to go out and advertise that yes, ham radio exists. Yes, there are people who love to do that. You might be interested in doing it. Here's how you can find out more information. And
Okay.
spread that out more widely.
The comment was that we can advertise the existence of ham radio better than we do. And the league tries quite hard to do that. It has a full-time paid staff of 2 people whose job is to get press releases out, deal with local public information officers whose job it is to coordinate with local papers and get articles about ham radio in them. We do a pretty good job of that with every field day. There's field day articles in many papers, and sometimes that registers, but people read the papers. Actually, a lot of people don't even read newspapers anymore. One thing the league did that publicized ham radio to an important group of people was the attempt by the league to get homeowners association related antenna legislation passed in the past few years. We did not succeed at doing that, but what we did do with that effort was we got all the members of the House and the Senate and their staffs to understand ham radio is there. It helps out communities in emergencies. It provides a technical hook to get people interested in STEM careers. It's a valuable contributor to society. So we're doing what we can to publicize it. You guys can help as well if any of you have the ability to interface with the rest of the public. We have a comment back here.
Yeah, I think you're missing this point. There's a lot more media that could be done. There's a lot more media vectors, if you will. And making a big deal about us going to Puerto Rico and helping, us helping out in hurricane. All the stuff that Harry said, all the volunteer support that ham radio does for Race for the Cure, all that stuff. Publicize it. Don't, it's not informational things, articles to put in the newspaper necessarily. It's stuff to get out to the general public to have awareness.
Okay. The comment was essentially I didn't give enough attention to the support, that we don't publicize things enough. But I will say we try harder than you might see. And we tried to publicize whatever we did in Puerto Rico, whatever we do in earthquakes. And the newspapers don't necessarily want to publish that. We go to the Los Angeles Times or the Wall Street Journal, and what's on the front page has to do with impeaching presidents and wars in the Near East. It's very hard to get our level of support publicized more. But we make as good an attempt as we can, and I hear you saying that we should do more, and everybody here has heard that, and the other director, and I'll run with it. We had 2 comments.
Well, when you go to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, that's the wrong place. You gotta be on Facebook.
Well, the league, the comment was we're in the wrong place. The league has a whatever you call it, a Facebook page, and it's upgraded, it's updated every week, and the board of directors gets a report from the public relations staff what the main thrusts of their Facebook pages are, what the thrusts of their Twitter pages are, and what their other pages are. The league is working those. If you haven't seen that, maybe we've not done enough job of publicizing it among the hams. Continue, back to you again.
Only hands are on that page. You gotta plaster it all over, all different groups.
Well, we had the comment that only hams are on the league Facebook page. We've got to plaster it elsewhere. We had another comment here. Is the league paying for any advertising in papers? I don't know. In newspapers, we probably pay for advertising in special things like to do with airline owner pilots association journals or civil defense publications, something like that we might pay for, but we don't have ads in national papers. we had one comment, a couple comments here. First there, you're next.
All right, the ARDC has tremendous resources, so perhaps producing some documentaries that are aimed at the general public might be a good use of some of that.
I didn't hear, I have QRM from K9 QRM. K9s are interfering. Could you go say that again, please?
Okay, the ARDC seems to have enough resources that they could probably produce or help produce documentaries that could be shown on television. A lot of people watch television. A lot of stations, or they need fillers, so you need little shorts. You can get half-hour segments. If someone was to produce those aimed at the general public and provide them, that would be a tremendous outreach.
Okay, the comment was essentially ARDC has money, and it would be a good suggestion. It was suggested that we might make shorter documentaries that try to reach the public on television stations and the like. We have some of those already done in the past. In fact, one recently was done by the Radio Society of Great Britain, which was aimed at young people and was actually deemed so good the league put it on its website as well, and people can try to push that out elsewhere. We hear you. Let me get to a few other. We have about 3 others with comments.
I'm just following along with what you said. I was going to add to that.
Oh, you were just...
I was just going to continue with what he was going to say.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking about stations like Nassau's channel. I'm sure we could get a program on the Nassau channel that had a good regular series program. Or Discovery Channel, Science Channel. I'm sure that some of the stations could get together on the 4K channel where they're trying to add the end of program. So I think there's a lot more that can be done on television than is being done.
Okay, the suggestion was there are specific television stations that he thought should be looked into. I'll suggest that to our public relations group. We had 2 more comments here.
Me?
Yes.
Is there anything at the league that could be done to provide some kind of training so that clubs who have a public information person, or encourage clubs to get a public information person and provide training to them? Because, like, I have no idea how to write a press release. I don't know who to contact about certain kinds of things. It's something beyond a laundry list that local clubs could go and use their local media to publicize amateur radio.
The question is, does the league have any resources that could be used to increase the effectiveness of local clubs in communicating to their local newspapers and whatnot? The answer is yes, and if you contact our public relations people, they'll work with you on that kind of an issue.
Okay.
You had another comment? Do we have more comments here? Here we go.
Well, speaking to both increasing general awareness of amateur radio and one of my favorite things, spending other people's money, I would really love to see lots of stations in public schools, and perhaps a grant program to support establishment.
Okay, the comment was that this gentleman would like to see more stations in public schools, and the story on that is 40, 50 years ago there were a lot more. There were many schools that had electronics class or radio class or something like that. They don't have that anymore. The hams that ran those don't exist. There are a few stations in schools. There are even less stations in universities and technical institutes than there used to be. You need somebody in the school who is interested in ham radio and can sell it. The league has a program called Teachers Institutes. Every year we take some group of teachers, we pay for their tuition, we pay for their hotel, their meals for a week. They get an introduction to electronics and ham radio. We put on 3 last year. They have about 10 attendees each. The Attendees all appreciate them. They say very good things about them. The question is, does it amount to any increase in the number of hams or something? The answer is, once in a while you get a teacher who puts a station in that does something. There's one in Southern California and around Fontana. Carl Gardenius is very well connected to them.
There is a foundation called Amateur Radio Education Foundation. Its mission is to help teachers put into school or lend equipment to those who use equipment. Very small, so we work at that. We find it difficult when we have new people on that have education background, and that's what we're trying to do. Is what Dick is saying. When we graduate from the headquarters, we try to pick up the next step underneath it so we can keep that going. And so that's what we do. We have two schools operating with schools operating at this point. We have more coming online. We give electronic tips. But yes, we're trying to fill that void. Back to you.
Okay, let me just review from the people over here that there is this significant operation in, I believe it's Fontana, where we're successful. There's a school, they license people every year. They've had ARRL presentations, which are very popular with parents, teachers, hams that participate, and the students. And so there are groups working to make this happen. Let's say, I'll go to you, but let me go back here first.
One of the suggestions that I have is, with all due respect to the people who are doing the PR today, get yourself a couple of bright young millennials and get out of their way.
Okay, the suggestion was get a couple of bright young millennials involved in PR, and we have some of that going on. Bill? You're up close enough, you can have the mic.
Thank you. I'll give it back to you right away. This is not a problem with amateur radio. This is a problem with culture today. 40 years ago, a book was written called Bowling Alone. That's where we are today. You've heard of it, Tom. And what that's about is our culture today, members are not joining. And you've heard this on the board of directors from ARRL staff. People are not joining organizations or clubs. And we talked about this in Rick's briefing this morning. When people get licensed, they go to a VEC, get the ticket, the local clubs never see them again because there's not a representative from the local club there grabbing their name and address, phone number, and email address to make contact with them again. And we had someone mention a great example of, well, we follow up with phone calls and it works. The Nashua Area Radio Association, Nashua, New Hampshire, won Club of the Year last year. And they went from a declining membership, I think it was down below 60, to up over 300 members now. The difference is the relationship they build with new licensees. The overwhelming number of new licensees comes from people interested in public service, as you mentioned earlier, Dick, not kids. Now, I'm not saying don't go after kids, because we need to improve STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education to get kids interested in this. It's not about putting a station in the school, it's getting the kids interested in those subjects. If you do it right, yes, eventually you may build a station in that school, and that Fontana example is perfect. I think it was they who showed up at the IDXC in Visalia 2 years ago, and the kids all stood out there and everybody clapped and they were excited, and it was wonderful because the teacher's engaged. She's active, she gets kids involved, and she's a great inspiration. And as I gave in my keynote speech last year at the Duke City Ham Fest Friday night, if you want to know what the problem is with ham radio, look in the mirror. Take a look at yourself. What are you doing and what are your clubs doing? So we're looking at forming a club institute, just like a teacher's institute, that will help club officers, people engaged in the hobby, to become better communicators, to become more welcoming, and to get people who are new to the hobby. We have enough people coming in. The problem is we're not holding on to them. Oh, I'm a member of the Secret Car Club of America, the SCCA, Sports Car Club of America. I race sports cars. They have exactly the same problem. They tried advertising on cable TV with the car network. It didn't work. What works is you and I talking to other people who express an interest. So just like when you're out looking for a job, have an elevator speech ready that you can explain to someone what ham radio is about, and invite them to the club, and be sure the curmudgeons are way in the back, and that there are smiling faces welcoming people they contact. That's what makes the difference.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Let's move on to something else now. And what we have is very important. Go ahead.
What we're facing is people change jobs every 3 years, and national average, they move every 5. So how do you keep track of these people? We're a mobile community.
Well, the comment was made, people change jobs and move quite often, and how do we keep in contact with them? And my answer is, I don't know. Let's go on to, let's try it. Okay.
What are your organization doing regarding protecting frequencies?
That's one of the things I'd like to get to. That's down, 3 down. So we're going to cover the Southwestern Division. One asks oneself, what am I doing? Can I go off and do something more productive, more fruitful, more likely to get results, such as work on getting a balanced budget for the federal government? And I had one of these a week or so ago, and I sat back and said, I made a commitment to the members of the Southwestern Division to try and improve things, try to get the situation in Newington on a better track, and I'm here working at that objective. The fellow who was Vice Director, Mark Weiss, K6VZ, a retired Los Angeles Superior Court Commissioner, went to his first board meeting and made the decision that it wasn't for him. He didn't like the politics, he didn't like the use that was made of his time, and actually resigned. I had tried to talk him out of it, but it didn't happen to work. So there is a vacancy in the vice director position in the league, and I'm thinking about what to do with respect to that, and it's not going to be fulfilled for maybe another month or so. So I wanted to make everybody aware of that situation. Let's talk about protecting frequencies. There is a significant threat to the 3 gigahertz ham band, and 3 gigahertz is not necessarily used by the majority of hams, but a major use of it is made by these people who put together the ARDN system, AREDN, Amateur Radio Emergency Defense Network. And this is like a Wi-Fi internet that would cover a community. You could make it cover from here to QuartzSite. You could even make it larger, and it will have some number of stations that are all interconnected, and they talk to each other, and then you talk to them, and you connect at a high data rate similar to internet. You could connect the ARDN system to the real internet if you wanted to. It would have, in many cases, it has adequate bandwidth to do that. So in some cases, some of the point-to-point communications take place in the 3 gigahertz band. These people have cleverly modified contraptions that are actually not made for ham radio. They're made for Wi-Fi in foreign countries, and they get them and they do something to them. Maybe they have to move the frequency, maybe they do some other thing. I don't know exactly what it is, but in some cases those things are used. And if our 3 gigahertz band goes away, they're one of the major groups that will be hurt by it. Another group are the 3 gigahertz, I'll call them weak signal guys, or the microwave contester guys. And I know one guy in Southern California that probably has $10,000 worth of equipment that he's purchased for that. And if that band completely goes away, that equipment is not worth $10,000 anymore. Now, let's understand who the competitor for those frequencies is. It's 5G internet. Now, who are the people that are supporting 5G internet? They're only Congress, both houses, both political parties, the White House, industry, and all 5 FCC commissioners. So if you think we have a trivial job, all we have to do is go fight and we're going to retain our frequencies, I'm not sure we're going to be able to fulfill your desires. My suggestion is we do the following. Number one is we outline exactly what we're doing that benefits the public on those bands. We point out the ARDN networks, where they are, how many of them there are, how they benefit people, how they benefit emergency communications in particular areas. We show what we do. Number two is maybe we can get some portion of that spectrum retained for us. Maybe we're not going to, but that's one objective we might try. A second objective is maybe this can get put off a good number of years, and a discussion we had at the board room said maybe we can push it out 6 years or something like that. And in 6 years from now, maybe contraptions that operate on the other bands can be modified successfully, and we can use different bands to communicate between the links on this thing. So, and another suggestion was, well, 5G isn't going to get rolled out everywhere at the same time. Maybe in Los Angeles it'll go out first, but maybe in Quartzsite it won't be around for a couple of years, and maybe something can be worked out so that in regions where 5G isn't implemented, hams can retain that and stay on the air longer. So again, the League is making what I'll say is a rational approach at trying to preserve that band as best we can. We're not suggesting a million-man march on Washington. It won't work. We're not suggesting that people are going to go on hunger strikes or set themselves on fire. I don't know what the answer is, but we are going to Congress. We talked about that particular thing, and we are dealing with the FCC. Again, they are not overtly friendly to us when it comes to considering us versus the rest of the populace who will benefit some way from 5G. You had a comment or not?
Kind of specifically, what are you doing? Kind of broad, but
Specifically, we're going to file comments with the FCC and possibly even try to get ex parte meetings with some of the staff that's involved with that, where we get our position across. And also, when we talk to Congress on another issue, which will be talked about in a minute, we might be making mention of that as well. I don't know what else to do. We had a comment back here.
You want a case study in Mesh? Take a look at Orange County, California, ocmesh.org.
Yes.
They have the valley wired to sound.
Yes, that's an example of one of the ARDN networks, and the headquarters of ARDN is in Orange County, and Andre K6AH is sort of, I think he's the president and main driver of that. So yes, Orange County is an area where we have that activity hooked up.
What can we as an individual do to help the ARRL?
What can you as an individual do? The FCC has opened up ability to file comments on this. You look on the FCC site and respond, or I think the ARRL is going to come up with a little, here's what you should do. It just happened like a day or two ago. So you'll have a month to comment, and then there's some like 2 months to file rebuttals to other comments. So that's what you can do if you'd like to assist. Any?
Voluntary monitoring.
Okay, we had a comment on another subject that's going to be down the log. Rick? Rick could get the mic.
I'm going to go back to the question you asked over here on the previous topic for just a second, because I think it pertains to the 3 gig and the way the League responds. And that is, that's one thing to say we're spending money to educate future hams and to, among ourselves, train ourselves as hams. I think the comment that was made was, what are we doing to educate the public that ham radio didn't go away in 2006? Is that? Yes. It didn't go away. We're growing, and the word doesn't get out. The FCC and our politicians have got to get the word that we're growing, and not only that we're growing, we're helping the community. We're putting in thousands and hundreds of thousands of hours nationwide in saving lives and supporting. That's what we want the league to do, is consider taking the time to educate the public of what is ham radio. That's, I think, what I heard.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Okay, let's move on to another topic. In terms of getting people interested and keeping them interested in ham radio, the league has come out with a new publication, and it's called On the Air. You can choose to have this magazine sent to your house once a month instead of QST if you like. You can still look at QST on the internet if you make that choice. I believe you'll still be able to look at this on the internet should you choose to look at QST. Director Abernethy has brought back a little pile of these. Should somebody want one, they have to go talk to him and justify their need for it, which may be a lot easier than you may think. So they are here, and it's aimed at someone who just got a license. And most people have looked at it, and it has topics that newcomers will be interested in, and you might look at it and see. It's one of the ways that the league is looking to grow its population by making it more welcoming. Any comments on that? I got a comment of excellent in the background. Thank you, sir. Let's talk about how many of you live in homeowners association controlled areas? 1, 2.
Condolences.
Year some way, either voluntarily getting some approval from your HOA or with a hidden antenna. So there's more that are on the air than are how they live in homeowners associations. That's an interesting number, but and for to quantify this, there's probably about 140 of you here now. So the question is HOA-related legislation what the major thing the ARRL should be spending money on? And in the league has had an effort to try to eliminate these HOA restrictions going on for maybe 30 years. In the last 5 years, we may have spent close to $1 million in lobbying to make it happen. It didn't. It looked like we came close a couple of years ago, but when you analyze the details of the agreement we almost got, which I've gone over here before, it wasn't really beneficial to hams. It was basically an agreement that said if you made some agreement with your homeowners association that they approved the antenna, you could put it up. And that's almost the situation you have now. Some of you have made agreements and you can put it up. So I'm left with how important is it that we continue this high level paying $100,000 a year for a lobbyist in Washington to go around and try to get the legislation passed. I'm not sure about it. There are a class of you that say something to me like, I really didn't want to move into a place where I was restricted from antennas, but my lifestyle was such that I had to. It just worked out that way. Or it was my wife needed to live on a golf course, and that was the perfect wife other than that, and so that was the compromise I've made in my life. Or whatever it is, and they're going to put up with it. It wasn't necessary that the ARRL go to try and get legislation passed that means you can not live up to a contract which you supposedly voluntarily signed. And I've been director of the league for a little over 15 years. In the 15 years, I've had one person came up to me and said, independently of what the league was doing, he said, I think it's important and the league should spend an effort to make this happen. This fellow died a couple months ago. So right now, people will support the league's efforts on this, but I don't know, is this worth $1 million a year? And should we be spending that on educating the public about ham radio? Again, our effort to do this has educated congressmen and their staffs and senators on ham radio. That's been a positive growth. And as it's pointed out, we show these people, yes, ham radio is still around. We're still doing stuff. We're bigger now, and they didn't know it, and so that has all worked out positively. Let's see, we have a comment here.
My understanding the HOA was written into the initial mortgage contract. Have we looked at doing anything with the mortgage companies suggesting that they don't include that?
The gentleman pointed out that he thought the homeowners association restrictions were initiated in the mortgage contract. The answer is sometimes maybe, but not necessarily. In some cases, they're instituted by the builder. And in some cases, they're instituted by people who want them. I've probably pointed out to this group, I live in Topanga, California. We have a lady there I'll call the Topanga anti-smart meter lady. She was afraid that smart electric meters that transmit from your house to a receiver on the street were going to destroy her brain, and actually wears a wig made of metal hairs, and it protects her. I don't know how it protects rays from coming in at her face, but I guess two-thirds or three-quarters protection is better than none. And do I think that she has a technical validity to her point? Absolutely not. But I will say I honestly think she is frightened of these kind of things. And we have the same group of people now saying that 5G is going to destroy our brains, and 5G is just a scheme by evil corporate interests to take your money and destroy your mind. And now my question for you is, does this lady and some of her friends have the right to go out in the desert and form a little community with a homeowners association that forbids you from having Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, anything? Should the federal government outlaw her from doing that? Well, we had a yes, but politically, I'm not sure I would force her to do that. If she wants to do that, I think that's okay. So right now, the league is going ahead with what I'll call a fairly substantial effort to work on homeowners association legislations in the federal government. Does anyone have any more comments on that? Should we keep it going at the rate we're going, or should we do something else?
Something else.
Again?
Something else.
Something else I got.
I feel that homeowners associations are just going to grow, and the problem is going to exacerbate.
Well, he said homeowners associations are going to grow and the problem is going to exacerbate.
Dick, I think the more homeowner associations we have that restrict amateur radio operation, the less people we're going to have on the air that are licensed, the more we're going to lose.
The comment was that Chris thought that the more homeowners associations we have, the more it will impede ham radio. And I agree, but I don't know, somehow or other, a lot of you have figured out a way to somehow get on the air. We had more comments.
I think the HOA education effort should continue, but I think the bigger thing is to educate the public in general about ham radio. You're trying to fix a little corner of the problem here with the HOAs. The education overall is probably more important and will fix this little corner problem.
Okay, the comment was educating the total populace on ham radio would be better than focusing on HOAs, and more effective, and might end up positively influencing the HOA group. Comment here.
Yeah, I think that advertising in magazines, newspapers, and all that, that's old hat. It's got to go to computer. Computer. Hams use computers. Stuff like that. That'll bring the younger people into it.
Okay, the suggestion was get computers more involved than, say, magazines. Let's move on to something else. We have another hand.
He's already over time, so
Yeah.
he's got to move on. Yeah.
I believe the comment was something to the effect that if you are going into an HOA, you should understand what you're going into work. And I've tried to get the board interested. I haven't succeeded, but I toss that out to you people that that was a way I thought we might facilitate that. And as obviously we've seen, people have succeeded without that. Let's move on to something else. Let's talk about the volunteer monitor program. For many years, the league had an official observer program, whereas if you had a transmitter that was working ineffectively, you had a second harmonic, you had key clicks, the official observers would send you a postcard that said, you have this issue, you might fix it before the FCC bothers you, and we're your friends, we're not out to take your license away, and hopefully by telling you ahead of time you'll fix it. And it worked for many years. I'm not sure that today most of us don't have homemade transmitters anymore. We have commercial transmitters that probably don't have second harmonic issues, and hardly any have issues with key clicks, so that isn't as important a consideration anymore. The FCC had an operation with our official observers where when they had a problem guy, like somebody jamming repeaters, the official observers got together with local FCC personnel, and they might have gone out in the field and triangulated and found the guy that was doing the jamming, told the FCC that, and then if the FCC did something, maybe it stopped. The FCC did not like the term official observer because the word official implied more than was agreed to by the FCC. So in the last couple of years, the league terminated the official observer appointment and has a new group of people doing something similar called volunteer monitors. The volunteer monitors will send out notices to you if something's wrong with your signal, but they'll send it out anonymously from headquarters, so you won't know who the individual that reported you was. The FCC has agreed to this. We've got about a few less than 200 of them. Let's see what we do. One of the things that people on the West Coast have pointed out is over the last 10 or 15 years, we've had one particularly annoying individual in Northern California jamming the WARFA group, Western Amateur Radio Friendship Association, a net that's on 3908 3 or 4 days a week at I think 7 o'clock at night. And they used to be all black fellas. They're now half black, half white. And this one guy has been badgering them for years with epithets, threats, and the FCC refused to renew his license. And then did that stop him? No. And a year or so ago, what's called an administrative law judge, who was an employee of the FCC, verified that not renewing his license was appropriate. And did that stop him? No, he's still jamming. And now he appealed to the 5 commissioners of the FCC, and I don't know what the status of that is, but it may or may not go away. In many cases, working with the FCC has gotten people who are outliers that are working against the interests of ham radio. We're not allowed to interfere with people deliberately, and that's what this fellow has been doing. And most of the time the FCC can stop it with letters and threats of what are called notices of apparent liability. The FCC leveled a $25,000 notice of apparent liability on the fellow. He refused to pay. The FCC went to the Justice Department on the West Coast, said collect the money. The Justice Department looked at it and said, $25,000 is, we don't go that low. We're interested in terrorists, drug smugglers, and people bombing airplanes and things like that, and we're not going to collect. So the guy never paid, as far as I know, and doesn't intend to, and no one's going to go after him to collect it. So there is a perception out there that the FCC, if you're nasty enough, isn't going to put you off the air, but in general, they do stop a lot of these jamming of repeaters, and there has been specific instances mentioned in the last year where it succeeded. So we'll continue. The volunteer monitors will work with the FCC and hopefully do the best to clear that kind of thing up. We have a comment from Rick.
Nick, earlier this year, just before the VM program started, there are a number of other activities that the OO program did, such as coordinating when operators didn't know they were using low funds on ham frequencies to run a bowling alley here in Mesa and so forth. We put forth a request to the league, from Arizona at least, that said all these other activities, like where we actually have OOs that still want to help let people know when they're operating out of, in other words, self-policing ourselves, and helping other communities when they have a question about our radiation and all. And I had recommended that, well, why can't we take those elements that were in the OO program and put them under, say, our technical coordinating people, our tech coordinating people. And has that gone anywhere? Does anybody even consider that?
Okay, we had a comment that in Arizona, some time ago, there were a group of people who had bought Bofeng $29 radios and were using them to run a bowling alley, and official observers found that out and got it stopped. And apparently this might have not been deemed to be part of the volunteer monitor program, but I think it would be. And the suggestion was, has there been any thought in integrating the part of the OO program that covered things like that into the technical coordinator part of the league? The section managers, if they want, can appoint a technical coordinator, and my suggestion would be, you have the right to do this. If it's appropriate in Arizona and you have the right guy in your technical coordinator position, remember that there are sections like Virgin Islands with 30 ARRL members. They might not even have a technical coordinator, or the section manager may have all the positions filled by himself. So I don't know that it's necessary that we define the exact duties of the technical coordinator down to that level, but I would be perfectly comfortable if you were to incorporate those duties into your technical coordinator's bag.
We're doing it, Dick.
They're already doing it. So he's got permission for me to do something he's already doing and doesn't need my permission.
I need the league's permission.
No, you don't. You're in charge. Okay, let's move on to what else we have here. The league website. How many of you are 100% happy with the ARRL.org website? You forgot to put your hands up. How many of you are of the position that it is a disaster and absolutely needs to be fixed? And then there'll be a lot of you that are just, it's kind of okay or stuff. So there are basically 2 of you who think it's an utter disaster. 3, 4, they're going. So 4 or 5 think that. And I assume the rest of you are like, yeah, it ain't perfect, but it ain't horrible. And I'll say that I'd like it to be more able to be fixed. When it was put together, parts of it are such that they're very hard to change. You have to almost be a programmer to do that. And so the league has a person who can change some things. The people in the offices around the league were supposed to be able to change their parts of it easier than they are now. I think what I have is a message from everybody that we could do better, but it's not enough that we blow the thing up completely. The league has what I'm calling the lifelong learning site under development. The league put a program in place to develop what I'll call a framework for delivering content on lifelong learning about a year or so ago. And we have a contract out for $500,000 for a company to do that. So they're developing it. We've put like 1 or 2 courses on it now. There's emergency communications course. Is that what was on there? And so that's been moderately successful. Because the course requires a moderator, that means every 30 people that sign up, we need a monitor volunteer guy to talk to them and answer questions. It hasn't gone as fast as it can, but it's kind of working. What I'll say is, when I heard last year right here that KE0OG had over 400 videos that were training, were education about aspects of ham radio, I wondered why we aren't looking at those kind of people and asking them to help and using some of their videos rather than developing everything from scratch with our employees in Newington. So the lifelong learning program is underway. I don't know that people are going to be paying to see videos and stuff, because you can see many of them. As I understand it, you can watch all the MIT electrical engineering courses for free on the internet, as long as you don't demand a degree when you finish looking at them. But and so it's going to be hard for us to sell something, but we're trying, and I take input here from any of you about how we should handle this, and we have a comment back here. You have a...
I am a senior application developer, computer programmer. That's what I do for a living. That website needs an overhaul, and it's not a one-time thing. The state of the art is it's an evolving thing. It's always happening. I don't think with a staff of 100 we can possibly ever do it. But it's ugly and it's fun.
Okay, we had the comment was he was a senior applications engineer, and he is familiar with websites and believes that we need a significantly large upgrade to our website. And we've sent it out. It was made by an outside group, and the lifelong learning site is put together by a different outside group. And exactly what we're going to do with the main site, how it folds into the new site, or how that oversees part of it, I'm not quite sure. We'll be working that. But I somewhat agree with you. We do need outside help with respect to our website. Any more website comments? Way back.
Yeah, this might be a little bit off topic, but how do you feel about UST magazine being available on RB?
How do I feel about QST being available where?
On RB Digital.
RB what?
Digital.
RB Digital.
What is RB Digital?
RB Digital is a website that provides magazines online, and it goes through the public library center.
Okay, the suggestion was, what do I think about providing QST on something called RB Digital, which provides magazines to the public through libraries? The League has a vendor that it uses to put QST online for you to read. It has also, after the current edition is not current anymore, the magazines go into the archives, and if you're a member, you can look at any of the magazines back to 1915 or whenever the League started. So, and that's a slightly different format. Now, I'm not an exact an expert in which is the perfect website or vehicle for delivering this content. I would say we should look into this, but right now it is not the belief of the board, I think, that we give away QST free for everybody instantly. I don't know, enough people have the feeling that most of what they're paying for is a magazine once a month, and if it's available for nothing, we may lose a lot of members. And so I guess that's, and advertisers is another thing. Advertisers pay for a significant part of the League. Question?
I think it will work the exact opposite way. I think that if people were able to see this, more probably we would get more members. If the advertisers would feel that their product would get exposed to more people.
Okay, the comment was that exposing the content to more people was valuable. We have one comment here.
I'll give you an A+ for LOTW. Thumbs up.
I said I give you an A+ for LOTW.
We got a thumbs up from Logbook of the World. How many of you use Logbook of the World? If you're on the air, and it's a really neat little thing. It keeps track of all your contacts, and if you care about how many countries you work, it tells you, and if you don't care, it tells you anyway, and you might kind of notice. When I first got on it, I work DX contests, so I work a lot of DX, but I never cared about how many I worked. And I kind of noticed, well, maybe I got 95 here. It would be neat to get over 100, so that kind of got me interested as well. A comment here? What do they do with surplus QSTs after the membership has been served? The answer is they make the right number, that there aren't very many of those. Okay, Virgil.
Yeah, jumping off of his idea, instead of giving QST away to non-members, why not do that with this new On the Air magazine? Get that in the hand of prospective hams, or
well,
yeah.
Why not give away the On the Airs? We're sort of in thinking along that line. Is that fair? Okay, what else do we have? We have the league has a petition into the FCC to grant more privileged technician class licenses. It has not been acted on by the FCC. I'll just kind of bring up another topic of regulation of the internal structure of our ham bands by the FCC. In most every other country in the world, their government gives the hams a ham band, and it doesn't say phone is here, CW is here, teletype is here. The hams figure it out. Are there ever any squabbles? The answer is of course there are, but the ARRL has continued to suggest that it's important for the FCC to do this. We don't do it at all on 160 meters. 160 meters, there's no phone band, and when there's a phone contest on 160, the phone guys expand out of their normally suggested phone band, and the band gets used more heavily than otherwise. When there's a CW contest on 160, the CW guys work up farther in the phone band and irritate a phone guy or two for a weekend, and on Monday that's all over for another year. So it has worked out. I have generally been an advocate of minimizing the FCC involvement in detailed regulation of ham radio. A while back, the league board passed a resolution that asked a motion that requested the FCC make some changes to digital communications, particularly to do with digital signals that were wider than 500 hertz wide, and in their motion they said these had to be restricted in some cases to 5 kilohertz wide bands, and the discussion in the boardroom was at some point we were going to expand these, but right now this was the case, and that digital signals should be required to be within a 2.8 kilohertz bandwidth. My thought was, if somebody comes up and invents a new digital mode that's 2.9 kilohertz wide, is it really in the interest of radio hams to go back to the FCC and request a rule change that now allows 2.9 kilohertz wide signals? I don't think it is. I don't think the FCC has indicated that they want to spend a lot of time on ham radio internal rules. Most of the FCC commissioners are interested in 5G, in selling off frequencies and getting billions of dollars for the U.S. Treasury. And when the hams are coming along saying, we want to have this rule, I don't know that it's necessary. I also don't know, personally, I'm not impacted by if somebody were going to use 2.9 kilohertz wide mode on 80 meters in Alaska, where during the day there's no propagation to anywhere. I don't care if he uses 2.9 or uses 6. It wouldn't bother me. And I think for the most part, hams throughout the world have shown that they don't want these regulations and they can live with them. Australia in the last few months has just abolished all bandwidth rules regarding modes, and the hams can do what they want. Are they interfering with each other? Are digital stations coming on and jamming everybody else? Of course not. Hams are decent people, with the 1 in 100,000 exception that we talk about. But that's kind of my little comment on that. Every time if you go to a fairly big library, you'll see a group of books, and they take up feet on the shelf, and they're all the federal regulations. And in there you can go to the federal regulations that impact radio, and you go to Part 97, and that's the ham rules. And all these rules about our bandwidth and stuff are all in all these libraries. And every time we change them, every library in the country that has these, their books are obsolete, so they have to go change them in their books. And I just don't know that in my world, society warrants us having changes made to thousands of books around the nation because we want to change our bandwidths or something, or we want to move the phone band on 80 meters from 3600 up to 3620 or something like that. I'd like to see it go where we have the right to do what every other country does. That's just my personal input to you as a director, and I have not sold this to the rest of the board. Does anyone have any comments on that? Let's.
I get saying that a digital signal has to be within phone bandwidth, but are you saying you would advocate somebody thinking if they have a digital mode that takes a phone band, that they would be no restrictions on that?
Yes, I am, but no one would ever invent such a thing because it wouldn't work. Say that again? Because if you put a signal that's 200 kilohertz wide on 75 meters, it'll be a waste of your time. WinLink with its 2.4 kilohertz wide signals is destroyed in every CW contest. They're off the air on the weekends. So these things, but I do say if you're in Alaska and somehow or other your system on 10 gigahertz breaks, and you could make a system work on 10 meters to do the same job, kludged together, and it ran for a week, you do no damage to me if you use a 200 wide kilohertz thing on 10 meters in Alaska, because right now Alaska can't talk to anybody but Alaska with the way we have the sun going.
I get it on 10 gigahertz, but I don't understand saying to open up HF.
Well, I just explained it that I don't perceive anybody is going to do that because it doesn't make any sense. And in 170 or 260 countries in the world, there hasn't been that problem. Was there any more comments? Yes. What's the present situation on symbol rate? That was where this all started. There's this rule in the FCC rules that says the symbol rate for digital can't be more than this, and we have the ability to have digital signals that are narrower in bandwidth than we have now, but they break the symbol rate. So I don't know what benefit we have for having that, and we tried to get rid of the symbol rate, and then people added onto it a bandwidth restriction. So my thought was we should have just got rid of the symbol rate, but that isn't what the league is proposing. What the FCC is going to do, I can't tell you. I'm not quite familiar with when you describe that signal with those numbers. I can't hear you. There's a system used by the Mars operators that we can use on 160? And has the world been hurt by that? It has not. Okay. Any more comments, questions, criticisms on any topic? I thank you for attending. Oh, wait, we have one more question.
Are you going to expand the privileges for technical or anything like that? Are you going to expand the license, change licensing?
The question is, the league is trying to expand the privileges on HF for the technician class licenses. There are people who wanted maybe a novice license to come back because they thought technician was too hard. Our G2 in the FCC that is not going to happen because their computer system is too hard to change to add another class of license, and they don't think it's worthwhile. So will they expand the technician bands? The league has asked for it. There have been comments made by hams in both directions, opposing it and supporting it. And stay tuned, whatever the FCC does, it will do. That's it. Thank you for attending. If anybody wants to talk about anything, I'm here.